Gives me real pleasure to introduce our presenter. Maria Michuris is an articling student at the British Columbia Law Institute and Canadian Centre for Elder Law. The Canadian Centre for Elder Law works collaboratively with community stakeholders, provincial agencies, national bodies, and other organizations to uncover hidden issues and that dramatically affect older adults. And we are very grateful to have them presenting to us today about dementia and decision making. Welcome, Maria, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Michael's already introduced me, but I'm Maria. I'm the articling student with the BC Law Institute and the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. Thank you so much for inviting us to have the opportunity to speak with you today. And as our presentation today is focused on dementia and care decision making, I'd like to acknowledge that our healthcare system is built on colonial health and wellness ideals that reflect a Western cultural perspective. And so throughout the presentation, I'd like to encourage you to hold thoughts about colonialism and how some of the supports available for people with dementia has the potential to manage, control, and limit how people live and continue their relationships with their communities and their lands. So our agenda for today is first, to go over some key care decision-making laws in BC. Second, to discuss ways to support and respect the decision-making rights of people living with dementia. Third, to understand the rights and responsibilities of family members and substitute decision makers. And fourth, to go over tools and materials to support individuals with dementia and their care partners in making decisions about their care. And just as a final disclaimer before we begin, everything in this presentation is legal information, and we're not able to provide you with any legal advice today. So legal information might explain what a legal term means or how a law works, whereas legal advice would be applying that to a personal situation. Law is very complicated, everybody's very different, so unfortunately we're not able to actually apply it to the situation that you may be going through since everybody is so unique. So just a bit about the Dementia and Decision-Making Project. This was done with the goal of changing how healthcare decision-making is approached so that the rights of people living with dementia are respected and they participate as much as possible in the decisions that matter to them. In the span of 3 years, the team partnered with people with different kinds of disabilities, including dementia, their family care partners, and healthcare professionals to identify strategies and barriers to decision-making, as well as identify ways to support families and healthcare professionals' capacities to engage people living with dementia in decision-making. And these decisions can include healthcare, finances, housing, and everyday decisions. In BC, all adults are presumed capable regardless of age or disability, such as dementia. People with dementia can make decisions under healthcare law and human rights law. They can make decisions until far into the progression of the disease, and decision-making capacity is not global, which means that one can have capacity to make one specific decision, but maybe not another. An example that comes to mind is a person who may not have the capacity to provide consent for admission to a long-term care facility, but may still have capacity to make personal care decisions, such as what clothes to wear or what activities to participate in. It's important to always ask, what is the decision at hand? And can they make that specific decision? And what do they need to understand that decision? Further, the role of supportive decision makers is protected in BC. This means that healthcare providers may allow the adult support person to help the adult understand or to demonstrate an understanding. And to be a substitute decision maker, they must be willing to consult the adult to the greatest extent possible and honor the adult's previously expressed wishes. For example, substitute decision makers should not decide what they think is best, but rather make a decision based on the best interests of the adult, considering things like the adult's wishes, their values, and their needs. Dementia meets the criteria for a disability. Therefore, people with dementia are protected under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Under the UN Convention, People with dementia have the right to make their own decisions, with their preferences recognized and respected. They have the power, choice, and control in their lives and can agree, refuse, or change their mind about healthcare treatment. They're entitled to the proper support they need when making decisions. This can look like communication assistance, maybe independent advocacy, a trusted, supported decision-making network, or even more time. When they need someone else to make a decision on their behalf, that person has the duty to decide based on what the person with dementia would want. Aligned with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the laws in BC, we always presume capability and capacity until it is proven otherwise. People living with dementia can make their own healthcare decisions if they understand the information relevant to a decision and can apply it to their situation. They might decline care that their family or physician wants them to accept, and their decision-making abilities may vary. They may be able to understand information on some days, but not on others. So it is important to consider this as well when asking a person living with dementia to make a healthcare decision. There are different ways to make decisions depending on one's abilities along the dementia journey. Presuming capability, unless otherwise proven, a person living with dementia can make their own decisions independently. As the dementia progresses, they might need some communication support or assistance to help them with making an informed decision. They can also have another trusted person support them in deciding, while ensuring their voice, preferences, and will are prioritized and heard. Finally, a substitute decision maker can be appointed to decide on their behalf. And just a note, receiving accommodations with communication is a human right. Therefore, healthcare providers must always communicate with people in a manner that is appropriate to their skills and their abilities. As I previously mentioned, the role of a supportive decision maker in BC is protected. So allowing the adult spouse or any near relatives or close friends to accompany the adult and offer their assistance to help the adult understand or to demonstrate an understanding of the information presented to them is an accommodation that healthcare providers can take into consideration. When it comes to healthcare decisions, remember that, first, no treatment can be provided without consent. Second, we presume that all adults are capable of providing consent unless proven otherwise. Third, if a person is unable to consent to a specific healthcare decision, a substitute consent must be sought from the right person. And fourth, consent must be informed. This means that information about risks, benefits, and alternatives of a given treatment must be explained to the person providing consent. So, who makes healthcare decisions for a person who's living with dementia? Well, first, the patient makes their healthcare decision if they have the capacity for that specific decision. Next, the patient can appoint a substitute decision maker through an advanced care plan. Or someone can go to court to appoint a committee for the patient, but this is a rather rare and expensive option. And lastly, a healthcare provider can choose a temporary substitute decision maker. Selecting a temporary substitute decision maker is done in a hierarchy or an order as set out in the law. It goes from spouse or anyone who lives with the adult in a marriage-like relationship, an adult child, and if there's more than one adult child, they are all equal, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, a grandchild, another relative, a close friend, or a person who is immediately related to the adult by marriage, so an in-law. And what are the duties of a substitute decision maker or a temporary substitute decision maker? Well, a substitute decision maker or temporary substitute decision maker must be willing to comply with the duty to consult with the adult to the greatest extent possible and comply with the adult's previously expressed wishes. So I'd like to spend this next portion of the presentation going over tools and resources. These resources are intended to support people living with dementia, as well as family or friend caregivers and care partners, and healthcare providers. These resources include videos, guides, pamphlets, and flowcharts. There should also be a Word document available with links to all these resources. However, if it is helpful, I'm more than happy to show everyone how to navigate to the website and how to access those tools and resources. First, our videos. We developed 6 videos highlighting the experience and expertise of different people, including a person living with dementia, a caregiver of a person living with dementia, and healthcare providers. These videos are an opportunity to understand firsthand some different perspectives on dementia. So our first video features Myrna. Myrna was on our advisory council and was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia in 2009. Myrna is a strong community advocate who shared her experience of being in the hospital with dementia. Myrna provides direct experiences as a person living with dementia and gives insight into the journey that she's on, including some strategies that she's found to help her with decision making.
I'm Myrna Norman. I'm in my mid-70s, and I was diagnosed with dementia, actually frontotemporal dementia, I think in 2008 or 2009. It's really difficult to make decisions sometimes, but I've learned that because I have the right to be joyful and to be happy and to be responsible and to do what I can as a citizen of my community, I also have a right to make decisions. Sometimes caregivers and or professionals, maybe inadvertently, but they still take those decisions away from us. And that's why it's important to say, for instance, we'll try with cooking. That's such an easy one. Do you want this for dinner or this or this? And let the person make the choice. It's difficult sometimes. It might take us 10 minutes to make that choice. But every time you allow us to make a choice, you are helping our ego, you're helping our self-esteem. Because I don't have a driver's license, because of my dementia, I think that loss of independence is huge and kind of squashing down. So when we lose abilities to do things, something that was part of me, like my driver's license, like the opportunity to cook, each time I had one of those losses, it just kind of took me down the well a bit. And then I discovered joy, and along with joy came opening up the doors of being able to make decisions. When I'm really tired from sort of overextending myself, I don't want to be involved in decision making, and I find I might get anxious from even attempting to do that. So decision making is best when I'm well rested and in a good mood. That always helps. It's so easy to fall into the cocooning, and I think most people, when they're first diagnosed, want to do that because it's such an overwhelming diagnosis. And I did that. I cocooned almost for a couple of years. And then when I started to blossom, my whole life changed. I was nicer, I was happier, all those things, and feeling better about myself helped me to make better decisions and to want to be part of making those decisions. We're human beings. We want to make decisions. We want to decide if we want to wear a jacket outside or if we're warm enough. We want to be able to do those basic decisions and even take part in the difficult decisions such as long-term care, whether or not we want to bathe today, all those things. And we understand we can't always make those decisions alone, that we may need assistance. But we know we don't need someone to help us make the decisions by not helping us, by directing us. So it's important that as a person with dementia, I listen to somebody else's argument, and then I can give mine so we can have a give and take, and then that empowers me to make the decision. And I feel joy, and I want other people with dementia to understand that they have every right that they had prior to the diagnosis, and that you can live well.
We have one more video. This video features staff at Uville residence who provide their insights into how staff can employ strategies and perspectives to support people living with dementia in decision making.
When I moved to long-term care from acute care, it became apparent to me pretty quickly that the underpinnings of decision-making were still automatic assumptions that we call someone's family, that we don't even start talking to the person or thinking about their ability to make a decision. I think just as an advocate that we really start with the person first. When the recommendation is made that someone can't be safely supported to live at home, what are the reasons behind that? Making sure that people have the information, that they've been part of the conversation, we brought them along. And I think that even in terms of moving into long-term care, while it might be the safest in someone's mind, it's also not a benign intervention, and that there is a consequence for people maybe emotionally around the move, around loss of autonomy, that actually can also be harmful.
I would say for other clinical as well as admin personnel who are working with people moving into our care, especially with dementia, to not rush through things. Everyone is taking in the process at their own pace. We try to avoid task-based care. In our own homes, we're not drill sergeants, we're not doing that task-centered care. Where this comes into play for people living with dementia is it is really crucial they have that personal touch, and they need space, time, and patience.
We have to be respectful because they're human beings, and we have to be kind to them. It's very challenging, but just think on the positive side.
Being thoughtful about where in the continuum someone is at, where in the continuum of decision making, and that is from independent decision making to supported decision making to substitute decision making, and to really, I guess, advocate and remind teams, families, that people are still able to participate in decision making, and that decisions are decision specific. So, you know, if somebody is living with a more advanced dementia, I wouldn't be using lots of information. It might be very simple. So maybe having someone present that knows them really well, understands their communication, checking for times of the day when they're more awake or alert, making sure I have an interpreter if English isn't someone's first language, hearing aids if we need, or pocket talk, or whatever we need to do to augment the conversation.
Sometimes the family wants something different than the resident, so it's really negotiating that, and that's when you bring in other team members to just really have a talk about what that person wants and what is their wishes and beliefs. So I think that's the most critical piece, is getting to know them, their life story, what decisions they've made before, but also acknowledging they may change their decisions as they move along, whether it's because of dementia or just as people, we change over time. We all take risks. I really object to, you know, all of a sudden someone is older and they're living in long-term care, and we We become very maternalistic or paternalistic, and we want to keep them safe and wrapped in bubble wrap, and that's not life, that's not living.
People have an emotional response to losing autonomy, and people can experience it, and it's important to remember that we don't want people to feel invisible.
So I'm going to continue our conversation about the resources that we have available. First, I'm going to talk about our guides. So our first guide is this one, a guide for caregivers and care partners, which contains information for family or friend caregivers and care partners on how to support people living with dementia in their decision-making. This guide provides strategies to help ensure a person living with dementia is engaged in decisions about their care. It also explains legal concepts such as capacity and consent to give readers a clear understanding of the different types of decision-making that they may be engaged as they relate to the person living with dementia. This guide can be provided to anyone who might need it, with their caregivers, care partners, to help them understand healthcare decision-making and laws relevant to decision-making. And just a quick overview of the guide. Section 1 defines what capacity is. Section 2 talks about common barriers to decision-making that people living with dementia experience and covers the information I talked about during the first half of the presentation. Section 3 talks about the law that applies to decision-making, and Section 4 focuses on spotlighting decision-making and long-term care. We also have a second guide for healthcare providers on engaging people living with dementia. It's a little different. It's broken down into overviews of key concepts and terms related to decision-making, legal tools and their applicable tests, and best practices aimed at providing a greater awareness of how healthcare providers can better incorporate people living with dementia in decision-making. It provides strategies to better engage people living with dementia in decision-making, and information on how and when substitute decision makers can be involved. The nice thing about this resource is that it can be read by topic as needed, it can be read in its entirety, and it can also be referenced in connection to our flowcharts or other resources. And I just wanted to share some feedback from one of the healthcare provider participants of our project and highlight what they said, which is that it's really nothing magical. It comes down to understanding the individual and the risk and what type of illness they have. As long as they are still capable, focusing on them as the center point of decision making. If they want to involve family, that's up to them. And some other tips that we've heard from our healthcare providers include every person is unique in their own way, so there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It is important to maximize one's capacity, so ensuring that we are considering the environment, time of day, and whether communication aids are provided for the person living with dementia to better support their decision-making. We need to talk to the client or adult first, then their family if the adult consents. It's important to take a collaborative approach. We need to remember to check our assumptions and how these assumptions may be informing how we communicate with a person living with dementia. And we need to be reminded that adults have the right to live at risk. And just some last tips about the importance of building trust, rapport, and relationship, because we want to build safety within our relationships. We should listen to and honor the person living with dementia's values. We need to pay attention to mentorship and practice. We should adapt communication and address limitations, observe behavior and give choices, and recognize any important cultural considerations. So next, I'd like to talk about our pamphlets. We have 3 information brochures that are a part of the tools and resources we created. Think of them as bite-sized versions of the guides that I talked about earlier. They're broken up into sections and are summarized, a little bit easier to read. The first is ways to support a person living with dementia in decision-making, which offers strategies for family or friend caregivers or care partners to encourage and support a person living with dementia in making decisions. Next, words you may hear from a healthcare or legal professional. This pamphlet briefly explains common words you might hear in either a healthcare or a legal setting. For example, supported decision-making versus substitute decision-making. And lastly, we have things to know about the law and decision-making. This one briefly explains legal concepts related to the law surrounding decision-making in a care setting. So again, what is consent? What is undue influence? What does it mean for consent to be informed? And the last resource that we have available are our decision-making flowcharts. These were designed for healthcare providers, and the flowcharts prompt users with pathways that have suggested approaches for people who do not clearly demonstrate capacity to make decisions with respect to healthcare, personal care, or admission to a care home or facility. Each flowchart has a QR code linked to it, so there's more detailed information. The first flowchart, the healthcare decision-making tool, provides a pathway to engage people living with dementia who may appear to have limited capacity to make major or minor healthcare decisions, and provides a prompt to the supported decision-making strategies that may help the person participate more effectively in deciding. Second is the personal care decision-making tool, which provides pathways to engage people living with dementia who may appear to have limited capacity in making personal care decisions, and prompts the healthcare provider to engage in supported decision-making strategies that may help the person participate more effectively in deciding. Third is the substitute decision-making tool for health and personal care settings when the person is not capable. It provides pathways to obtain substitute consent when it has been determined that the person is not capable of giving consent, after supported decision-making strategies have already been attempted. Lastly is admission to care facility application, which provides a pathway to engage people living with dementia who may appear to have limited capacity in either consenting or refusing consent to be admitted to a care facility, and prompts the healthcare provider to engage in supported decision-making strategies that may help the person participate more effectively in making the decision. So that reaches me to the end of our presentation. So a quick thank you to our funder, Vancouver Foundation, as well as our project partners, including the Alzheimer's Society of BC, Centre for Research on Personhood and Dementia, and Family Caregivers of BC. And of course, please feel free to stay in touch. We've also got a Word document that has links to all the resources that I chatted with you about today. But of course, if anybody would like, we can go back to a slide to review something. We can open up the website and I can show you how to navigate and access the website online. Or we can go over any questions that people may have.
Okay, I've gathered quite a few questions here on a few different topic areas. One question asked was, how do you find a lawyer that has deep experience with dementia cases?
A lawyer with deep experience on dementia cases. I might recommend some online resources, maybe something like Access Pro Bono, British Columbia, Government of BC might have some resources as well to help you locate a lawyer who specializes in that area. I can't name every single lawyer in BC off the top of my head, but Organizations like Access Pro Bono could offer you assistance in setting you up with someone who will be able to help you through that.
How and where can we get the guide you were talking about? And someone also asked about the pamphlets, and I know there are links to those in the resources that Lori Kelly's provided in the chat there, if you want to find that. But if you had other sources for those guides, presumably your website.
Yeah, so I'm more than happy to show you how to access the website. So let me just share my different screen so I can go through the website together. But here's the website. I need to move my bar. It's not in the way. There you go. So this is what our website looks like. There's a link to our website in the doc, but if you aren't able to find the document or you lose the document, you can also just Google BCLI, British Columbia Law Institute. From there, if you click onto our website, you'll see our homepage. You can click onto completed projects. And when you search right here, you'll be able to find dementia and decision making. You can also just Google BCLI, dementia and decision making. And on our website here, it explains what the project is. And if you scroll down, you can find all of the guides and pamphlets and brochures that I talked about. So for example, here are our 3 brochures. Just click view and download. And it'll show you here the brochure with all of its information.
Okay. A few people had questions specifically about dealing with a person living with dementia in denial about their condition. Marianne shares her story. If your spouse has agnosia and are they always capable of making the best decision for themselves, for those around them? How do you even approach this if your spouse doesn't believe there is anything wrong? They've previously expressed wishes, if their wish was to never go into a home, but now you feel they must. Then what?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Again, kind of like in our presentation, it all really comes back to communicating together, respecting people's independence, giving people choice, that family planning, right? It's a very individualized, unique, and personal experience. And everybody's journey, communication style is going to look a little bit different. I don't know if maybe even somebody who is in our audience today has a similar story or who worked through something similar in their family wants to share how they kind of came over situations like this. But yeah.
Yeah, and someone else shared a similar issue with, where was it here? My loved one responds no to offers of help. It doesn't really matter what the question is. There are other people experiencing those same things.
Yeah. So definitely know that you're not alone, and that many other people are kind of on the same journey as you. And don't be afraid to turn to those people to build your own support network around you and to seek out other people's experiences and kind of relate them to your own. But from all I can offer is the kind of resources that we've provided based off the research that we've done, the people that we've spoken to, both people living with dementia and healthcare providers and caregivers, about the importance of respecting people's autonomy, both to them as individuals, but also under the law.
And there were a lot of questions that came in on the theme of decision making. How do we know whether somebody truly understands what they're deciding? What if the person with dementia is being scammed of all their money? Do we just allow that to go ahead? Is actually understanding different from demonstrating understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complicated question to kind of see what that threshold is between kind of, for example, consent and informed consent, and when somebody has understanding and when they might not have understanding. Again, I really want to emphasize that it's going to look different for everybody. But when we talk about incapacity, generally those determinations are made by healthcare providers and lawyers and sometimes by a court. And that finding, so we want to actually say we found that there's in some cases that somebody may be incapable of making decisions. That finding of incapacity can be done in many ways. And that can be an informal process or a formal process. And there can be informal assessments that all people are going to go do in making decisions, whether it's at home or in a doctor's office or meeting with a lawyer. Like, for example, anytime a person meets the lawyer has to consider if that person can give them instructions. And in that situation, a lawyer must think about whether the person understands what they're to do, among other things, regardless of a diagnosis of cognitive impairment. And the definition and process of finding someone incapable is different for each decision. So a person is typically not found to be incapable of making every single decision. For example, a doctor might find that their patient can't make a healthcare decision, prompting them to get consent from their substitute decision maker. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they can't make a personal care decision. I hope that gives a bit of a broader answer to your question. And all of this information, like more detailed information about what exactly does incapacity look like, what is informed consent, you can find more information about defining those legal terms in our guides, as well as references to those exact laws and sections that they specify.
This is an interesting question that just popped up. Do lawyers get education related to dementia?
Oh, yeah, that is a good question because it's such an important topic, isn't it? I would say that law schools, as someone who just graduated law school, they're definitely moving towards discussing more kind of well-rounded approaches to law. How does law affect young people? How does law affect older adults? But typically, you have to seek out this kind of information, which is why you'll find some law students take a class on law surrounding dementia or decision making, and they find a passion for that. And that's why you'll find lawyers who specialize in dementia and decision making, and those are the lawyers that you want to speak to, because a criminal lawyer might not necessarily be able to help you, but there are lawyers who specialize in this, and this is their passion.
And we do have a question about what to do for those who cannot afford lawyers.
Yeah, I would recommend checking in with Access Pro Bono BC. They can offer free or low-cost lawyers, depending on your situation. That's just one good resource that you can go to if you're trying to find a lawyer.
One question is, how can you get the right to talk to the doctor about your partner's condition once the health is considered private?
Once the health is considered private. Again, it's, I think, a very unique situation that depends on what's going on in your current family. I don't know why the doctor decided that something was private. I can't speak to that. I don't know the particular condition that that person might be in. I don't know what the relationship between the family members are. So I can't say how in your situation you might be able to talk to the doctor. But as we kind of talked about in the presentation, generally there is something called supportive decision making. We have a right to that, to ensure that people living with dementia can make informed decisions.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was incredibly valuable information. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our participants did as well. If you or anyone you know is living with dementia or caring for a person with dementia, either personally or professionally, you can call the First Link Dementia Helpline. Alzheimer's Society of BC staff provides confidential care and support to people living with dementia and their family members who are facing the challenges that dementia brings, from diagnosis or before to end of life. For people in British Columbia, English services are available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 1-800-936-6033. We also have helplines for the Chinese and South Asian communities available from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And people living in the Yukon can call our Yukon helpline from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you again to Maria and the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. On behalf of the whole webinar team, thank you for tuning in today, and good day.